Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Eternal Optimist podcast. I'm your host, Matt Drinkhahn, and today it's a special day because I have on the podcast today someone who I would call friend, who I've known since I was 23 years of age. And if you know my age now, that's more than half a life ago for me. I met this gentleman back in my second month when I was selling Cutco knives when I just finished my junior year in college. I met him at the SC1 conference for the first time, and he's had an impact on my life ever since then. He was the district manager running essentially the state of South Carolina, but officially he's in Columbia, South Carolina at the time. He was a big-time district manager that had an impact on me. And the reason I want to have him on the show today is because he's had some amazing impact on people in the world. He's got an amazing story. And without any further ado, I would like to welcome to the show my longtime friend, Mr. Dan Andrews. Dan, how are you, brother?
It's good to see you, man. It really is, and I'm happy for this opportunity. I'm happy that when you moved, you didn't move that far away, and now I have two friends in St. Simon, so I have all the reasons in the world to come down there. But yeah, it's good that you're not far out of reach, because the few times we've connected in Charlotte always were very meaningful to me, and I appreciate that you made the time for me.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to it as well. Today's going to be a good conversation, whatever that means. I've really been looking forward to it. So let's dive right in. And
Sure.
For those people out there who are in the world of Cutco, vector marketing, Dan was a top performer. Well, back when we were both in the business, it was about 2.5 decades ago when we were district managers together, different territories. But Dan, and if you look on YouTube, by the way, those of you watching or listening, if you look on YouTube, you'll see in Dan's background, he's got 2 of his Excalibur swords that are hanging on the wall. He's got a third one that's coming out of the ground over there. So Dan was a top producer back in the day, and you can see that is evident on the wall. Now, I have a little bit of pain in seeing those swords, because in 2002, someone broke into my office, my Cutco office, and they stole everything in the office. They stole $32,000 of inventory, and they took my radio, and they took my Excalibur sword. So if whoever did that back in the day is hearing this now, yes, it hurt for a while, man. I don't have my Excalibur sword, because the insurance money covered all of the equipment. It covered my radio. They wouldn't pay for the Excalibur sword, though. And at the time, that was about a $550 sword.
Yeah, that's definitely.
Yeah, they didn't cover that. Insurance didn't cover that. So I never replaced my Excalibur sword. So I'm a little bit sad, but also happy seeing that you have yours. So Dan,
I'll drop it off with you the next time I'm in.
Yes.
You can keep it for a couple decades.
Nice. Well, let's kick things off with the simplest hard question there is.
Sure.
Who is Dan Andrews?
Recovering people pleaser. The short answer, or the cheat answer, is what do I do for a living? Right? Because so many people identify who they are with what they do for a living. I'm a child of God, right? I'm a Christian. I've accepted Christ as my Savior. Primary role. Secondary role, a husband to Adina Maynard, and a stepdad to 2 kids that live far away. And she and I have only been married 6 years, so I'm still establishing that relationship. But, relationships are the key. I mean, we're here for that, right? We're here for the way we can impact other people and do kingdom work. I've been fortunate to bring some skills, and I want to use the word skills and not talents, and not natural gifts, but skills around relationship building into the business role, and to actually make a living at that. But it's interesting, because this is the second time I've run a business in Columbia, South Carolina. I was with Cutco in 2 main capacities, district manager and top sales rep for 13 years. Was gone for 13 years and came back here 9 years ago with a model around creating meaningful connections, facilitating people's ability to develop significant business relationships through both introductions and reminders of the key elements. And the people that I worked with, in the 90s, plenty of them remembered me right by name, which was kind of cool. My first year in business, 25% of my clients were former customers or former sales reps of mine. So that was meaningful. But there was a bit of shock around, wait a minute, Daniel Andrews is coaching relationship skills now? Because in the 90s, I wasn't known for my relationship skills, right? My first wife had a habit of saying, Daniel's better in small doses. So, the gift that I have is teaching and understanding where somebody's coming from. Meaning I can kind of meet you where you're at and point you in the right direction to where you want to go. I can't make you go, right? But I can point you in the direction you need to go and give you the tools. And because I was not naturally gifted at relationship building, when I discovered the significance of professional relationships and how that can make a difference, I'm like, okay, I kind of stumbled into this one, but I need a model that allows me to systemically create quality professional relationships. And, that's where I'm at, right? Nobody gets on my calendar except by invitation, meaning they need to be introduced by somebody else. And I don't say that in a braggy way. I say it because I want the inbound. I mean, before we started recording, you asked me a question and you said there's a conversation we had about the fact that you have some business that might need to be referred to me. And I'm like, that's how business can and should come to people that are very professional at the work they do.
Yeah.
Anyway, I can get a little more of that, but I had to learn how to do it. And I'm good at teaching anything that I had to learn how to do.
Well,
my analogy situation is if you look at professional sports, you'll see gifted players, right? There were superstars in high school, college, and then go on to pro, and they do well. Those A-plus gifted natural athletes almost never, few exceptions, almost never become coaches. It was the solid B-plus player in the pros that goes on to coaching, because the B-plus player probably didn't have any natural gifts. He had to be made, or she had to be made, from a D player into a B-plus, and so they understand the progression, right? And this goes back to Cutco days. If I say the name Carlton Walker, you probably remember who I'm talking about. And he was naturally good at Cutco. Naturally good at Cutco. Yeah. And if you asked him how he did it, he would go, I don't know, I just do it. Which was true. He didn't know. He just did it. He couldn't tell you what made him good at it. But I would watch him and I'm like, oh, that's what he's doing that works, right? Yeah. And even though he came on the scene late, I learned a lot from Carlton, but I had to watch him. He didn't teach me. I had to watch him and go, that's what he's doing that works. He couldn't teach it the way he could execute it because it came to him naturally and he had no awareness of the gap between not doing it well and doing it well. Yes. I was terrible at Cutco when I started. My first 11 demos, 3 people bought 1 knife each. That was atrocious, right? But I had to learn how to get good, and that made me good at teaching people how to be good.
It's interesting you mentioned, because I remember Carlton very well, and I've had a number of conversations with him, post Cutco days, and your atrocious record of going 3 for 11, your first 11 demos, selling 1 knife to 3 people each. It's better than mine. I went 0 for 13, and then sold my first.
Fundamentally not that much different, right?
Yeah.
The net sales volume was approximately the same.
Well, the point being that when you're talking about you were not the fastest out of the gate in that skill, you weren't the fastest out of the gate in right? You say not being naturally gifted in relationship building, you had to work at it. I deeply resonate with that because I've had to work to pick up most things as well. And for those of people listening out there who are like, yeah, some people just get lucky, or they're born with a silver spoon, or they're born naturally talented. I would have to say that I was not born naturally talented. Now, I had what I would say is strong upbringing, meaning that parents that drilled into me the idea or the value of believing in yourself and giving your best effort and work ethic. If you fall down, get back up and try it again. So I had strong parents that taught me that. So that's why I feel I've been able to be successful in most things. It's not because I was first out of the gate and the fastest horse to run the race. I was the horse that was still standing and eventually developed more speed because I just stayed. I think you're sharing a similar story. It's what I'm hearing. Yeah. So let me go back in time, because you feel that you were not naturally gifted at the relationship building part earlier. When did you realize that, you know what, I'm not naturally gifted at this and I've got to really work at it? When did the first thoughts of that come to you in your life, Dan?
Well, my first wife and my second wife are both very plain spoken people, meaning the number of times I have said in my life, I do not like what you said, but I like that you said it. So my first wife, Kim, who I think you met at one point, yes. Right, her ability to go, this isn't working. When she would say things like Daniel's better in small doses, I'm like, okay, I need to take that to heart because this is the person that knows me the best, right? And so that was part of it. And part of it was my struggle as a Cutco manager. I was a way better rep than I was a manager. I was a rep, then I was a manager, then I went back to being a rep. And I got literally average results as a manager. Every year they would come out, the average district office produced X amount of volume. I was literally, no exaggeration, no hyperbole, within 1% of the average every single year, which meant I was never going to get promoted. And I looked at people like Larry Manley that produced additional, managers with them, right? The gifts around Dan Cassette, right? And Mark Lovis, right? Where they developed whole teams, right? And people were anxious to move up and to be affiliated with them. And I just had average results, right? And so it told me that, working with me over the long haul was not something many people appreciated. So I'm like, need to look at that, right? Because the opportunity was the same in Charlotte, North Carolina as it was in Columbia, South Carolina, right? The opportunity to sell blades, move up, get paid. And yet you and Charlotte were getting things done at a level that I wasn't, right? And Matt King is a good example, right? He came into my territory after I resigned the district manager position. He came in to fill that void. And in his first year, doubled my best year. And I'm like, maybe I'm missing some skills, right? So I shouldn't say maybe. I knew by then I was, but it was clear that someone else needed this territory because I wasn't doing it justice. So, and that's how I come to all my positions, right? Results. You look at the data. The data tells you you're not good at this, or the data tells you you are good at this. I say all the time, I have very few opinions besides pineapple belongs on pizza. That I'm firmly convicted on.
Oh my God, no.
But it's an opinion, right? Meaning you can disagree and we're still friends, right?
Yes.
But a lot of the other stuff that I share with people, then you have a position and it's not an opinion. And you're entitled to that, but you're wrong. Anyway, the things that I teach and I say, people go, that doesn't sound right. I go, I know. I used to believe what you believed. And then I looked at the data and it wasn't taking me where I wanted to go. And I found a different approach, right? And so I do believe there's a difference between an opinion, a philosophy, and a position. And I try to have as few opinions as possible and as many positions as possible, i.e. I'm strident on a handful of things where I have the data to back me up.
Understood. Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate the trajectory of our conversation because I don't think that enough people say it out loud or hear it enough times that you can get what you want when you just stay in the game, or you practice your game, you raise your skill level, you practice, you work on it. And I feel like you're a great example of that. You didn't necessarily get it at first in the relationship part, as you're saying now, but now, years later, by practice and sheer will, because I've always thought of you as someone that has an incredible will, that you have figured it out. And it wasn't easy and you didn't get lucky. You just kept practicing and learning. And that might be one of the messages of an eternal optimist is, I keep learning. There's an opportunity to keep learning if you lean into it. And you've demonstrated that by being top of your field of what you do now. So
I've said to several people, if you show me a plan that works, I'll set records. Just give me the plan that works, and I will outwork you on it, right? But because I knew what I didn't know, so give me the roadmap that works, and I'll make it work at a very high level, and that's what I've continued to do. Now, some of this roadmap I had to evolve myself, right? And there are some fundamental, there's more than one way to do it that gets, good results. But a lot of the patterns that people use around what they call networking, which I don't even like that word because it means a low value activity. Most people's, there's a lot of things that need to be corrected there in terms of getting results. I mean, you're entitled to approach any way you want, but if you're going about it in a way that we know brings low value, please don't complain to me that you're finding low value in the exercise, because we knew that, right, when you did it.
I totally agree with that. So I want to go two different ways in our conversation if we can have time. I really want to get to what you do professionally and talk about that. But before we get to that, I'd love to understand some of the backstory of Dan Andrews, and specifically, I'd love to ask you if you could take us back in time to a time in your life where you had to endure and or overcome something that was incredibly challenging for you. Can you take us back to? You can go back to birth all the way up until today, but somewhere in the timeline, there was a big challenge.
Right.
What comes to mind that you can share with us?
The first one, not the first one, the one that comes to mind that meets the criteria of a really significant obstacle came to mind when you prompted me, that this might be one of the questions. A situation which I'll dive into where I couldn't control it, fix it, outwork it, outsmart it, right? Meaning as difficult as a number of things have been in my life, if I had a plan and or a work ethic, a plan and a work ethic or no plan and a work ethic, I knew I would get through it, right? Meaning this isn't easy, right? It's got more moving parts than I thought, but I will dominate this, right? I will master this at some level. And so the one that came to mind is that when I'm doing the math here, it was January 1990, and which means I was 24.
Okay.
167. So no, I was 23. I just turned 23.
Okay.
And I was at a restaurant here in downtown Columbia. I can tell you where it's at, and I know exactly which one it was. It's still there. And I asked my brother, we were both single. I was engaged, but we were both single, technically. And I asked him, about his dating life. And he told me he was dating a guy at that point. It was the first time that had ever happened in our world. And because of my brother, and we were not particularly close. We had a lot of animosity between us, which my dad later said he figured marked down as his biggest failure as a dad, but that's neither here nor there. But I had hoped as we matured, we would get closer. Anyway, when he told me he was dating men now, I knew, and people argue with me, but I knew that he was going to die of AIDS. This is 1990, right before they had anything remotely approaching a cure. It wasn't a worry. It wasn't a fear. It wasn't like, what if he dies of AIDS? It was like, I know that man, and he's going to go the risky route, and he's going to die of AIDS. And December of 1995, 4 days after his 30th birthday, he died of AIDS. And, that created a huge series of challenges for me. My folks were divorced, and the pain that it caused to each of them was huge. And my dad had remarried, but, so he had somebody kind of there for him, but my mom hadn't. But in either case, they didn't need somebody. They needed each other, and they couldn't be there for the other, right? And so then it comes to me, right? And I'm busy helping my parents navigate this instead of navigating myself, which was a pretty significant challenge. And I couldn't help my brother. I couldn't give a donation. I couldn't donate a kidney or a blood transfusion. There was nothing I could do to help him.
Yeah.
And I was just feeling pulled in a lot of directions. First time in my life I'd seen my dad cry was when my brother was ill, and he made he's sitting in my Cutco office. I can even tell you where it was. I can drive you to that location today. Nobody else was there at that moment, but he's sitting in my office looking across from me. I was behind my desk where I normally am, and he was sitting there, and Dad started to cry. And he said, "This is not the way it's supposed to be," right? And we know that as parents, you don't ever anticipate seeing your children die. In your head, the model is, I'm going to go first, right? Great kids, and I'm going to enjoy my grandkids, I'm great grandkids, and then one day I'm just going to die peacefully in my sleep. And because we live in a fallen world, it doesn't always unfold that way. and so there was just a lot about that situation that felt out of control to me. And I don't like out of control. But if I can control it, or if I can convince myself I can control it, then I can predict the outcome or come up with an outcome that's livable to me. But, my mom and my dad both in great pain and lashing out at each other and, the world, right? It feels very unfair, I'm sure, for a parent to see that, trying to manage the dynamic between them. I think my brother's illness and death, I can't pinpoint this because my cousins don't talk to me anymore, but I think my brother's illness and death and some of the dynamics around that is the reason two of my cousins I was closest to won't return my calls to this day. We've been distant. Since, what is that, 30 years, 95? Yeah, 30 years, right? And it pains me greatly that these two cousins that I'd shared a huge part of my, childhood and early youth with that won't return my call. And I think it has to do with the family dynamics that unspooled around my brother's death. So that was the tough situation where I'm like, I don't see a path forward here, right? There's not a workaround. There's not a solution, right? This is wading through the valley of the shadow of death. And I'm just here, right? There's no shortcut. There's no helicopter, there's nobody parachuting in with supplies, right? There's no helicopter with a hoist to bring me out of the valley of the shadow of death. I'm just going to have to walk through it, right?
It feels like, it'd be impossible for me to comment because I don't have any siblings. I have no idea what that would feel like. I'm curious, what was it like for you from, December 95 for the following weeks, months? What was that next period in your life? How did you deal with that? And what was it like?
Grief is not something you get over. You just, adapt how you process it, right? But I think like a lot of terminal diagnoses, the people in your life have a longer time to process that you won't be on this planet, right? And so the sadness, right? The two thoughts I had when my brother said he was dating guys was so much for talking about our girlfriends, because I'm not going to talk about dating the guy that's dating guys. We're not getting into the whatever that looks like, right?
Okay.
And my second was he's going to die of AIDS. And I had some sadness and some grief and some loss around the fact that I had looked forward to, me and my wife, whoever that was going to be. I had one picked out at the time that wasn't my first wife, whoever his wife ended up being, our families vacationing together, potential children, cousins, being nearby, and, the whole family vacationing together, and me hanging out at his house, and, his wife hanging out with my wife. And, I'm like, well, there goes that, right? I was looking forward to being Uncle Dan, right? And I'm like, there goes that. And, so, the process of grief, started sooner. But, I still reflect on the fact that we didn't really, mend our relationship, right? When he was dating a guy in Atlanta, so not that far from here. And my wife and I would go to visit occasionally, or have a need to be in Atlanta, for Cutco reasons, as you know. And we would find a place to stay. And he was offended that I wouldn't stay with him and his boyfriend. And I'm like, there's a whole lot of reasons. One is you've got a 1-bedroom apartment, but no, we're not going to stay there. And he felt it was a commentary on him, right? And I'm like, you just need to understand, we're not going to stay at your apartment. And he manufactured some distance between us that he didn't need to manufacture over that issue. And so, there wasn't a moment when we're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Now, I'm sure we said I love you to each other at the end, plenty of times, but we never did create that bond that a lot of siblings say they have, with each other. I was thinking we would get there.
Yeah.
But the last time he and I got in a fist fight, and I won't even tell you what it was for because I'm highly embarrassed, was I was 21 and he was 23. And we were in the backseat of my dad's Cadillac throwing punches.
Okay, hold on a second. Time out. You're embarrassed by it, but that was 30 years ago, Dan. 37 years.
But the reason why we were fighting, but at age 21 and 23, you've got to have better conflict resolution systems than throwing punches, right?
Fair statement. Right. We learned that,
And my dad, who was driving the Cadillac, pulled over on the side, and I don't remember how he settled it, but I'm pretty sure there weren't fists involved, but I'm sure there was some physicality involved. And I do remember clearly there was quite a bit of anger involved. And my dad going, what is wrong with you two? Right? He's like, I can't believe what I'm seeing here. And the part that's most embarrassing about the fact that we were throwing punches is my fiance was sitting between us.
Oh, man.
So I really should blame her for going ahead and marrying me shortly after that. She should have stepped on off right about there. She should have been like, this is not going to work. So that's the most embarrassing part of that. But there's other embarrassing parts too. But, so we just never got to, a lot of that.
Well, you talked about grief is not something you get over. It's something you adapt to or adapt with over time. And now that that was, 37 years ago, 30, somewhere
30, 95. He died in 95. Yeah, so 30 years ago.
Okay, that was 30 years ago. How are you processing that now? How is that sitting with you now?
I mean, I deal in reality, right? But I the older I get, the more I realize the loss of not having, a brother and a sister-in-law, and maybe her brother. So we could, my generation, right? Somebody my age, because the only people that have known me since I was born at this point, they're still on this planet, are my cousins, right? And most of them live in Florida. And so, I actually said to them, if I don't live in South Carolina, I'm likely to move to be near you guys because you're the only people. I mean, their parents, but their parents are almost at the end. I said, you're the only people that have known me literally since I was born. And that's how there's just some calling towards home and family that exists in that context, which is quite odd. I shouldn't say odd, but unexplainable. I should say common, not odd, but unexplainable. Just the draw to home and family. Yeah. And so, not having, children for him to enjoy his nieces and nephews and not being able to enjoy mine and then their children, right? Because I look at the way my aunts and uncles have got, one of my aunts is a great grandmother. One of her daughters is about to be probably not long before she'll be a great grandmother.
Wow.
And Yeah, and just that doesn't that only exists at the cousin level, not at the brother level, right? For me, and so I'm just kind of aware of things that didn't happen that could have happened differently if he hadn't
It
passed.
makes me want to write down who are the people that know me the longest, and am I paying attention to those relationships? Because I was thinking about this not too long ago. From my own lens, is that I don't have any siblings. I had a sister;
Mhm.
she passed a long time ago, so it's just me as the only child of my mom. My dad died 20 years ago, and my mom is up there in age. It won't be long, God willing, hopefully longer, but not as long as I might like. That before I'm the oldest male Drinkhahn in the world, and
Yeah.
then yeah. So I think about that from time to time. But you've caused me to write down. I'm going to go back and kind of audit and see who I've known the longest and how I'm keeping up with them. And I think I'll be surprised and maybe a little bit saddened by some of the relationships may have just fallen out or just dropped off the radar.
And there's some value in keeping those people in your world, right?
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot to do with the Cutco fraternity / sorority, right? There's just something about having been in the trenches together that makes this stuff sticky forever, right? In a lot of ways.
Oh
Which
yeah.
is interesting. But God's right. We call it coincidence when we don't understand God's will, but when we do, we call it God's timing. But just yesterday, I told my wife, I'm going to go in the garage and spend 5 minutes. I'm going to pick up 6 things and put them where they go: trash, recycle, filing cabinet, safe, whatever. Because my mom's, illness, death, her mom moving in with us, right? Multiple households have been combined in this address over the last 6 years.
Yeah.
And one of the things I picked up was the letter my dad wrote my mom the day after my brother's funeral.
Oh my gosh.
Right. So I'm like, well, didn't expect to be crying at 6:30 on a Tuesday evening, but here I am. And it's a very heartfelt note from my dad to my mom about what a great mom he thought she'd been, and his regrets about the death of their relationship. And anyway,
Yeah.
so
I feel the waterworks might be coming out. It's possible. This just triggered something that had a major impact in my life. That when my dad died on Memorial Day in 2005, of course it was shocking. He was in good health, and it was out of nowhere. And then I kind of went into a deep depression, and that lasted for probably about five plus months. And what brought me out of it was my mom read my dad's journal or diary, and in it he had written that he only had a couple of regrets in life, and one of them was he never got a chance to caddy for me on the pro golf tour. And I had let go of that dream to go and chase people building and success in the Cutco world. And when she read that and shared that with me, it's like instantaneously, almost like overnight, I'd snap back from the bottle and just a deep depression and kind of wandering mindset that I'd had for 5 months. And it brought me back to focused, and I'm back on the journey. But it took that as the catalyst to bring me out of whatever funk I was in. I remember that very clearly.
It's interesting. My dad passed a few years ago, and we had resolved, quite a number of the things that, sons and fathers, deal with over time. And he owned a property that he was selling, so he kept the mortgage on it, meaning he owned it and payments were being made. And a couple of years before he passed, he gave me the LLC that owned it. So I then had the responsibility to collect the mortgage payments, but it was my income, it was a gift from him to me. Which was quite generous because there was over $100,000 left on the mortgage. So it's been a nice steady residual check for the last 4.5 years. It runs out in January. So. But anyway, and he said, do something fun with it. And so my dad had been a pilot his whole life. And so I started taking flying lessons. And because of the vagaries of life and the vagaries of getting a consistent flight instructor, which is harder than you think, that's willing to work for you the hours you're willing to work with, right? Because some of them view it as a 9-to-5 job. They don't want to be available on the weekend. I'm like, I've got a 9-to-5 job. You need to be available on the weekend. Others only do it until they get a job with a regional, or a cargo carrier, and then they're gone again. Anyway, I did not finish my piloting lessons in time for my dad to join me in the cockpit. And I said to him, it was clear that was going to be true. And I said, I really wanted to be your co-pilot. And he said, I really wanted to be your co-pilot.
I hear you.
Right. And that was big because my dad was a fighter pilot, right? And if you remember the end of Top Gun, and we laugh about it, not the second movie, everybody's thinking of the first movie, right?
Yeah.
You can be my wingman. You can be my co-pilot. No, you can be my co-pilot. Right?
Anytime. Yeah.
And that was considered a high compliment. And my dad was a fighter pilot. And part of my issues with my dad was he fighter piloted me father to son. Fighter pilot to fighter pilot, that talk, the smack talk is very helpful. It's not a very good father-son conversation, right? And so, right, when he said, I'd have been your wingman, I'd have been your, and I'm glad we were able to get there at the end. And he had the ability to say a lot of things. Because 10 years before he passed, he couldn't say some of those things. And something snapped. I went to visit him in the middle of my course. I went to visit him, and we got in his car. We had a whole day planned to drive around the part of the state. We had lots of memories, everything from church camp to vacations with family. And we were just going to spend the whole day driving around the upper state of South Carolina. And we got in the car, and he said, I have a lot to apologize for.
Oh, wow.
Unprompted. And I said,
what? Wow.
I know. And 8 years before that, I'd asked him for some apologies and didn't get them. So the fact that he started over there, I don't know what happened, in those 10 years, those 8 years, but he said, I got a lot of things to apologize for, don't I? I said, there's some things we should talk about. And he said, come at me. He said, put it on the table and we'll talk about it. And we spent 2 days driving around the upstate of South Carolina, both crying our eyes out. So,
wow, you're reminding me of the last conversation I ever had with my dad. I remember it very clearly. We had spoken a month, and it was a result of some success. I got a nice big bonus check in Cutco, my first super bonus check, and I called him and told him that I was going to go and celebrate, and he didn't agree with the way I was going to go and celebrate, and so we didn't talk for a long time. And then my mom brokered a deal to get us back together at a 2-day golf tournament, Memorial Day 2015. And then within seeing him, within 30 seconds, I broke down. I was crying. I was like, I'm so sorry. I've just been really obstinate and been a bad son. And I saw him only cry twice in my life. And that was at his mom's funeral and his dad's funeral. And I swear that there was a red eye there, which is the most emotion I think I ever saw him share aside of those two funerals. And of course, he was happy and maybe had a tear of success when we did well in sports. That's a different type of crying. But that last conversation that we had, we let go of a little bit of animosity, or not animosity, of ego. Because I feel that there was a lot of ego involved for me. And I don't know if there was for him. I think there was, but I don't know. We can only offer at the capacity of which we're capable at that moment. And I don't know how capable he was based on how he grew up to be able to be hyper emotional. But that last conversation was a gateway for me to start to learn how to feel emotion. And that, granted, it would be another 8 years before I could cry again. And now I can cry all the time. I've already cried in this call. I cried this morning and yesterday. So the Waterworks Eternal Optimist podcast today. But in any event, thank you for sharing the story. I want to segue. I hate to do it abruptly, and I think it's important to segue and share a little bit about your business and where you're pouring your energy and passion into now, because it's interesting, and I think it merits a conversation to really dive into what is your business in its current form, and how did it come to be, where it is now. Love to explore with you where your profession has taken you.
And for literal time constraints, because at the top of the hour I have a Zoom call with the former Cutco manager that I have a long history with, right? Yeah. Which is coincidental. It's a bunch of us Cutco guys back to back. I was on a call with John Berghoff yesterday, as a matter of fact. But anyway,
sharp day.
Yeah. But also because, if I go too deep, it's going to start to sound like a sales pitch. And so for those of you that are wondering, am I going to pitch my business? I'll give you the pitch right now in one sentence. There's more where that came from. That's the pitch, right? I mean, if I share some things and you're like, that's interesting. Okay, cool. I have more to talk about, right? We'll figure out a way for you guys to find me here shortly. But anyway, the nature of the work. Okay. First wife used to say consistently, if you could figure out how to make a living off all the handshakes between other business people that you've created, right, you'd be in great shape. And I used to say there's not a model for that, except a finder's fee model, which is de facto a bad plan, which I won't debate today. I will link you to other podcasts where I destroy the notion of paying people to bring business to you, right? It's not a good plan. But anyway, back to the point. And I'm like, I don't have a model around that. But in my mind, it was always obvious that the graphic designer and the billboard salesperson, right, should be in touch with each other, right? Right.
Yeah.
Clear. Yeah. Right. The divorce attorney and the moving company should go to lunch every so often.
Yeah,
right?
It makes perfect sense. Yeah.
The salary negotiation coach and the resume writing coach ought to be best friends, right? It was always clear to me right? That the guy that sold promotional products, right, and the guy that sold trade show booths, the sign company and the promotional products company ought to be in business, practically in business together, right? And it surprised me that the side effects of ADHD is the ability to see patterns and quickly and easily, right? So that was what my first point was referring to. You're good at figuring out who can bring business to each other, right?
Yes.
And so 9 years ago, when I was presented a model under the brand name Network in Action, where you bring people together, right, on a consistent basis, not like a leads group, like a BNI or anything like that, but a monthly in-depth meeting where you actually get to know people and start to build the relationships, right? I'm like, okay, I can do this, right? I can. And so I was living in Houston. I was a client of Network in Action when I came back to South Carolina to be closer to both mom and dad, who were living separate, of course, married to other people, but both getting older and dying. I brought the model with me. And I evolved that in a couple of directions. But the main thing that I can do for people at this point is help them figure out how to ask the right question from the right person for the right introduction. And those sound very simple, but if I challenge anybody to frame that for me in their world, right, professionally, right, what is it, what's the right question? Who's the right person, right? What's the right introduction that you're looking for? Who are you trying to get to through somebody else? Nobody can articulate that. They're like, oh, I understand that. And I'm like, well, then, just show me you've mastered any one of the three. And they always start stumbling over their words, or it's vague. Well, anybody or everybody, or, anybody I think I can help. That's a good introduction.
Yeah.
That's a lousy way to phrase it, right? They're not good at asking the right question. They're not good at asking it from the right person, and they're not good at identifying, what the right person they're trying to meet is, right? How do you get there? And so the work I do is around helping professionals, and it could be real estate, it could be mortgage or financial services, it could be a coach, a high level coach, not somebody that's just hung out their shingle today, right? And they're hoping to, the business will land in their lap if they post enough on Facebook and LinkedIn, right?
Thank you.
Right, but a consultant, or these days their keyword is fractional, right? Is the same as a consultant, there's a different name now, right? But somebody with a significant B2B offer, right? You've got software that a business needs, your credit card processor, anybody that has to go get the client and then serve the client, because they want to spend less time on the getting without losing the number of clients, and more time on the doing.
Yes, sir.
Right? You get paid to deliver the results. You don't get paid in the sales process. So anybody that can benefit from figuring out how to get more business by spending less time with fewer people. And I can show mathematically within about 10 minutes, I can prove to the average professional that they can 2x or 3x their income in the next 12 months by spending less time with fewer people and never going to another networking event again if they don't want to.
Yeah.
If they don't want to. And once you do the math and they see that it's possible, then they're like, okay, how do I get from here to there? And I'm like, that's where I come in. Right. But it is all a question of mastering, asking the right question, which is its own degree of mastery, from the right person, which is its own degree of mastery, for the right introduction, which is its own degree of mastery.
Yeah, I think of those three different subjects right there. And you're right, every one of them requires mastery to be at an expert level, every one of them. And I know so many people that are probably good at the questions, but they don't know who their introduction is supposed to be to. And they probably don't know the right people either. So you can be good at one, but that doesn't mean that you can succeed with all of them, and then you need all.
Well, here's the biggest shift. They do know the right people, because the people meaning even if you can't call to mind people in your circle that are prospects, trust me, there's more than you think there are. If I challenge you to go through LinkedIn right now, you would write down within 20 minutes, 20 names of people that you had forgotten you knew that need to buy what you're offering, literally. But the other part of that is we can't envision what we've never seen, which is our network. Your network is not your network. Your network is your network's network. Okay. And since I've never met all the people Matt Drinkhahn has met, I don't have any way to picture how much value he has. But if Matt Drinkhahn is not my prospect, I guarantee it, he's got 50 people on his LinkedIn that are. So now I have to find the Matt Drinkhahns of the world, right? That's the right, asking from the right person. I have to master how I ask you that question, and how I then want you to introduce me to who I know to be my best prospect, right? So I have to articulate my prospect, figure out who I know, meaning if the people I know aren't the right person, i.e. somebody that's going to spend money with me, who do I know that knows the right person?
Yeah.
And if you're not going to buy from me, but you know people will buy from me, all of a sudden you're the right person for the moment.
Yes.
as a stepping stone to the people that will buy from me, right? So you're no longer the wrong person. You're the right person for the question, who do you know that can buy what I offer?
Well, Dan, I'm going to put a bookmark in it because I'm looking at the clock and I know that you've got another meeting coming, and this has been incredibly insightful. Can you tell us, where do we find you? Like, where is the website or the social media? Like, how do we connect with you and learn more with you?
Sure. There's a million Daniel Andrews on both Facebook and LinkedIn. So danielpatrickandrews.com, danielpatrickandrews.com. You can't Google Daniel Patrick Andrews because that's the name of a bombastic parliamentarian from Victoria, Australia. And he owns the first 1 million search returns, right?
Wow.
If you Google him, you'll never find me. But danielpatrickandrews.com. And depending on when this is released, if it's more than if it's no sooner than August of 2025, you can also find me at I heard you on Drinkahn's podcast.com. Buy that domain today. I heard you on Drinkahn's podcast.com. So just make sure you spell Drinkhahn correct, right?
Yeah, I was thinking that.
Podcast.com. And that'll take you directly to my scheduling calendar for a get to know you meeting. There is no sales pitch involved in our first meeting with me ever under any circumstances. I'm a firm believer nobody's a prospect until they say they are. So we're going to just talk for a minute and you're going to describe your business model. I'm going to describe mine. And if you're like, can I get some more details on that? We'll schedule a second meeting from there. Excuse me. You will schedule it. I will send you my link. You will choose to schedule that meeting. I don't pressure anybody into doing anything with me.
Awesome.
I mean, it's a Zoom call. How could it be pressure? There's a little red leave button down at the bottom. How can you pressure somebody on a Zoom call? You can always just leave out.
And man, this has been awesome to really hear your story and feel your heart, and just thank you for sharing this. And I love that you even have a new website coming up. I heard you on Drinkhahn.podcast.com. That sounds very entertaining to me. But
it's just going to take to my Calendly link, that's all. But
Awesome. Well, danielpatrickandrews.com. Dan Andrews, almost a 30-year friend. It's been great, my friend. Look forward to the next connection. And that's going to be a wrap. So thanks so much, brother. Yes, sir. Take care.